We're here in New York City to do a bake-off between the Garmin Fenix 7 series and the COROS Vertix 2 multiband GPS. Now, multiband, or dual frequency GPS as it's called, is considered the holy grail of GPS accuracy. You have basically multiple satellite systems on different frequencies, and between that you can get up to like 60 different GPS signals at once. And the idea is that with more satellites to connect to, you can get more accurate results. So here we are in what's arguably one of the most difficult GPS environments in the world, surrounded by buildings that go 50 to 70 stories high. And as I said, we have a bunch of watches, in fact. So I've got the Fenix 7 Sapphire Edition, Sapphire Solar, which has a multiband GPS. I have on this side the COROS Vertix 2, which also has multiband GPS. But I also have with me a base Fenix 7 right here, which does not have multiband GPS, but does have the same GPS provider, so the same GPS company, just not the multiband portion. And then my wife over here also has a few watches. She's got on this wrist the Fenix 7S Sapphire Edition, Sapphire Solar, which has multiband GPS. And then on this wrist over here, the Instinct 2, which does not have multiband GPS. And then up here, the Garmin Epix, which does have multiband GPS. And then in my case, I also have the Descent G1, which does not have multiband GPS. It's essentially just an Instinct 2 that's for diving as well. So once we have GPS signal, we're gonna run about a half a dozen blocks to Central Park through these buildings here, and then we'll do the loop of Central Park and all that kind of fun stuff. I've done that for years as one of my GPS tests. And after that's done, we're gonna swing back down into the buildings again, all the way down to Times Square here, and see how the GPS handles the buildings on some of the smaller streets. So first up, getting satellite signal. So I'm gonna go and just start these watches right now. Run. There we go. We'll put them right here for a second to find signal. You can go and start yours as well if you want to. So everyone is done. That was by far the fastest I've ever seen GPS signal from any watch at all. I use the same spot, like literally the same little intersection for the last decade in testing, and that was really impressive from all the watches. Now from a spacing standpoint, so they're all nice and even. This is how I've got them set up. You can see they don't touch each other with a couple inches apart. This is exactly how every GPS manufacturer does real world testing, just like this, on the wrist like that, not side to side. That's not good. So I'm gonna go get these all started. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and off we go. Okay, so we're starting off here, getting up to Central Park. Not running on the sidewalk right now, simply because it's pretty busy over there. But here in what is effectively a parking lane next to the bike lane, stoplight. Don't worry, on the way back down to Times Square, we're gonna choose a skinnier street to really press things a bit more. So we're trying to make this light up here. Got 14 seconds to get all the way down there.
So looking at this first section right here, you see that the Garmin is on the road, but the COROS is off in the buildings there. That's the red track right there. And of course, it gets better as you get closer to the park though over time, which probably indicates that the initial lock that the COROS had, even though it was the fastest, wasn't the most accurate lock. Now, if I go ahead and pause for a second here, you'll see I've added the orange track of the Garmin Fenix 7 base in it, and it's not great. It's not as good as the blue Sapphire Edition, but it's definitely better than the COROS by a little bit, at least until we get into the park. Then we've got the two multi-band Sapphire Editions my wife was wearing, and they started off a bit rough, but once we got going here, you can see it stayed on the road. There was no like building blocking. Obviously, it's not the exact route we ran, but it's at least on the street itself. And then finally, using the older GPS chipsets, despite being newer watches, you can see here that the Descent really struggles like the COROS Vertix did, but the Instinct 2 base seems to be pretty decent, staying again on the road all the way into the park.
Okay, popping into Central Park. We'll hang it right up here on the main loop, do the loop all the way around. And one of the reasons why this particular route is so interesting is that yes, it starts off in the buildings is really hard, but in theory, Central Park allows the GPS units to regroup a little bit. And also, on some edges of the park, you get some pretty interesting reflections and whatnot coming off the buildings, where signal reflect off the buildings, that we want to test as well.
So looking at the first chunk of the park, at first things look pretty similar, but in reality there's a really interesting difference here. Notably that blue track there is on the upper edge of that roadway, which is exactly where we ran along that kind of left-hand side of the road the entire way around. Yet the red track is just offset. It's on the road in general, which is good, but it's not quite as perfect as the Fenix 7 Solar Sapphire. And if I add the Garmin Fenix 7 base in there, you see that it's kind of like the COROS Vertix 2, and that it's on the roadway in general, but it's not exactly where we ran, though it is actually slightly closer than the COROS was. Then adding in my wife's multi-band Sapphire Editions here, and you can see in this case, they were on the correct side of the road. You see that space on the bottom of the road there, that's showing the right-hand side of the road, so that's good. And if we look at the Descent and the Instinct 2, they were just on the road, so not as accurate anymore with that older GPS chipset.
So here we are at the far point of Central Park, just starting the hills. I know on the GoPro it doesn't look like a hill, but at this point in our day, we're at 14 hours into it in one transatlantic flight. So we're still a long day. How's it going though?
Slow and steady.
That's the spirit. One thing you have to understand about my wife is that when she says slow and steady, that means she's about to go past someone. She just like completely dominated past that person there. And even pushed a little bit harder as she went past. She's going for the pass. Going for the pass. Executes on the pass. Lance Armstrong is left in the dust. Granted, his bike is 50 pounds. You see all sorts of hilarious stuff in New York. This guy is rocking on a run right now, and he's taking a full-on conference call.
Yeah, then going to the
and just owning it.
and do Sarah.
New York. So about now, some of you are saying that I should do a second test to have more even results and switch the wrist. So flip the wrist back and forth and see how they are. And I have a couple thoughts on that. One, I already did that in my full in-depth review for 2 months of switching wrists and negligible impact. But two, more importantly, I see accuracy testing kind of like a race in the sense that you've got one shot to get it right. So in this case, if today was a race, if I was out here on Sunday in the New York City Half Marathon and my watch crapped the bed, then it crapped the bed in the most important race potentially in my year. And so that doesn't help any. And the same thing here where I'm out running and these watches have collectively this one shot, just like one run in the Olympics, one race, whatever it may be, to get it right. And that's just a point in time. And maybe it's just they're 1 out of 100 they got it wrong, but again, that doesn't matter if it's your race and your data is all screwed up. The building's coming up in just a moment here. That's the great equalizer for GPS. So when we got married, we had a vow, and one of the things in our vows was that we would never, ever ride a tandem bike together. Just because it's never gonna end up well. I have no problem. I think it looks romantic, Central Park, but it's just gonna end in a poor marital situation.
I think it works well for our personalities.
Exactly. We would, by the end of it, either we'd be going like 40 miles an hour, hammering it, getting a ticket from the police over there.
Or someone will be walking.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so hot, they brought in the fire truck for us.
Sure.
So looking at the second half of the park before things get spicy, it's basically just like the first half, and that the Garmin Fenix 7 Sapphire editions are the most accurate one. The COROS Vertix 2 isn't bad at all, neither is the base unit. It's just not quite as good as the Sapphire editions on the Garmin side. Of course, again, you can see here some slight differences though between the Epix and the Fenix 7S on my wife's wrist, but overall, everyone's on the road itself. Even the Instinct 2 base and the Descent G1 using the older chipsets are all on the road. Like there's no major errors here.
Okay, here we are exiting out of Central Park into the buildings. Okay, running straight on down Broadway, just still on the edge of the bike lane here, out of the way of that. All the way down, you can see the buildings are starting to crowd together here, and they're gonna get taller and taller as we get closer into Times Square. Just a couple blocks left, we're almost there. There we go, we have completed our loop. Right now I'm at 11.56 kilometers on the Fenix 7, 11.51 on the Descent G1, 11.58 on the Vertix 2,
11.65.
on the Epix,
11.76.
on the Instinct 2, and on the mile side we've got 7.19 on the Fenix 7 base,
7.14.
on the Fenix 7S Solar Sapphire. Now, what's more important though is looking at the actual GPS tracks.
So starting off with the battle royale between the Fenix 7 Solar Sapphire and the COROS Vertix 2, both in multiband, you can see here clearly the Fenix 7 Solar Sapphire wins this one. Those first 5 or 6 blocks, the COROS was off in the buildings there. The last couple blocks here, up until this moment right there, they're pretty darn close, and of course they do end in the same spot. Adding the base in there, and the base easily actually beats the COROS Vertix 2, which I did not expect. In fact, the base looks really darn similar to the Sapphire edition, despite not having the Sapphire multiband chipset, at least in theory anyways. Very, very similar there. Then looking at my wife's 2 units, both Solar Sapphire, again, on the roadway, but not quite as good as mine. And that may be for who knows any number of reasons, but just kind of notable there. And then the other 2 units are, again, off in the buildings, kind of like the COROS Vertix 2 was. In fact, they spent most of their time in the buildings as opposed to being on the roadway until we finally got to Times Square, and then they stuck the landing there. And I think ultimately, if we go back and look at the stretch here, what we see is kind of indicative of the entire sort of set, which is that the Fenix 7 Sapphire is the most accurate run alongside the Epix there. And the Fenix 7 base, though, it really does hold its own despite not having multi-band GPS. And then on the COROS side, I think that despite having theoretically the same GPS chipsets as the Fenix 7 Sapphire or Epix Sapphire editions, it's just not as good. Whether that's due to antenna design or firmware or something like that, it's just simply not as sharp as the Sapphire editions from Garmin.
Okay, there we go. A complete look at GPS accuracy in New York City. If you found this video interesting or useful, go ahead and whack that like button at the bottom there, or hit subscribe. We've got lots more fun testing coming up in the next little while. So do we, yeah, you're part of this too.
Yep.
Yep. So definitely stay tuned with the channel for that. And with that, have a good one.